All right, so thank you. So what I'm going to do, as I say, I'm sort of dry running some basic presentation skills. I work with a whole host of SMEs, and business schools and management schools, and so two passions really for my business. Yes, of course, there's a commercial side because we've all got mortgages and things like that to pay, but also having been around the block and been very grateful for a sales career. I'd like to work with the next generation, let's say, of sales professionals or business professionals, etc. Because presentations is not all about for salespeople; it's for lots and lots of different people. It's a life skill, I think. So that said, I just wanted to go into some kind of basics. I'm not sure if I'm going to share screen or not, but Daniela hit it on the head. This is much more about a conversation around some learning points and whether I say anything that kind of makes sense or not. And by the way, if you want to challenge anything, please do feel free to do so. I hope I'm going to create an atmosphere of trust between us on this particular session. If you want to challenge or add or take anything away, please do come off of mute, and that's what this is all about. So it's got to be interactive, if that's okay. So I've got a few things here. Let's go with ding ding ding. We've done that. So if you're watching this on record via YouTube, please hit subscribe. And for loads more sales hints and LinkedIn tips, that would be really, really good. So presentations then. What we're going to take away from this session are some terrible ways to start presentations, and I'd be really interested in Daniela and Tristan if you've heard any humdingers, and I've heard loads over the years, but also some great ways to start. What you do before, during, and after. Tristan, you mentioned about preparation and what have you beforehand. That's really interesting, and hopefully this will make you just a little bit more confident in your presentations. The kind of thought processes you're going to have prior to presenting. Now, a lesson I'd like to have you heard that analogy around the beautiful swan swimming very gracefully along the water, and looks beautiful, but the legs are going kind of like that underneath the water, so it looks very graceful on top, but there's lots happening underneath. Actually the week before last, I was speaking at an event in the northeast of England, and now I'm used to public speaking, but it was the first one I'd done since before lockdown. So the first one in about 3 years. I've done loads over Zoom, but this was in person, and about 50 people in the seminar room that I was in. And I thought I was pretty relaxed. I was engaging. People were laughing. I'm not quite sure why, but they were. And then I came out, and I know that I feel a little bit anxious underneath. If we say the butterflies in your tummy, but I think the butterflies were flying in formation, at least. But when I came out, I happened to get sight of myself in the mirror, and I was bathed. I mean, bathed in perspiration, and so totally the wrong shirt. Totally the wrong shirt to wear for that occasion. Let's just let someone in. Excuse me. And so I was kind of like that swan, that I was fine, I thought, on the outside, but on the inside I had lots and lots of anxieties. And so my point is that we all go through that to a greater or lesser extent, and I went through it much more than I thought I would do. Hi, Natalie, welcome to the call. So I just want to get that point over, that no one, I think, even Jeff Bezos, when he's up on stage talking, there's still something that could go wrong. So there's still always just a little bit of anxiety. You would not be human if there wasn't just a little bit of that. Okay, right. So that said, let's get into what we can do to talk about great and terrible, what terrible looks like. So here's some things I've heard for in the last 12 months, and also across the rest of my career, is, and the typical corporate one. So if anyone's watching this, take note. And I've worked for some pretty big brands. Is the typical ones I see is, hello, my name is, I work for blah blah blah. We are based in blah 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 city, and we have X number of employees. And that is a terrible, for me, that is a terrible way to start out your presentations. And I think the main reason for that is, well, there's two reasons. First of all, I'm guessing that you had permission to go there and present. They already know that stuff, and they can readily obtain that stuff from the internet. So that is not the right way to start a presentation. The other things I've seen are, and technology vendors are particularly adept at this, is something like, I've only just seen these slides, so bear with me. I really don't like that, because that for me is a lack of preparation. If you've got a number of people in the audience that have taken the time to go along to your presentation, you should have taken the time to see what the slides are before you press presentation mode. Other terrible ways are, someone else did these slides, so don't blame me. That's the inference. I've seen that more times than I care to admit. And the worst thing is, if you could just talk amongst yourselves while I get the IT set up, it should already be set up. Now, that's whether we're presenting over Zoom or whether we're presenting in person in the room, I believe. So it's about poor preparation prevents poor presentation. I just made that up, but I think it works. All right, so next. Now, has anyone got anything else in terms of terrible openings that they want to add to that? You're very welcome. But if not, I'll go on to, okay, so before the presentation, some key mistakes that are made. Number one is show up and throw up. So there's no real structure to what people are talking about. They'll just, and again, technology or complex subjects. So it could even be economists, full of jargon, very technical, very advanced subjects. I absolutely agree, but they'll just show up and throw up, and there's no real form or structure. They haven't really thought about the messages, about how they might land appropriate to the audience. That's the most important thing, that you are presenting to an audience whom I presume you want to effect some sort of response from. So they'll often meander, and what I mean by that, they'll just just take too long trying to say what they're trying to say. They'll go all over the place, as opposed to being linear, which is where you talk just about the subject and you're very concise, very to the point, and very on point. I've also sat in presentations where I've kind of wondered, what are we all doing here? So all of us are really busy. Sometimes I show up to presentations online as well, where I can't quite remember what it was all about. I know it's in my calendar, I'm going to attend, but I can't quite remember. And if you assume half of your audience are going to be in that place, they can't quite remember. So you need to start out and tell them why they're here. And in fact, something like, we are here to talk about presentation skills. Is that right? It does a couple of things. First of all, tells everyone why you're there. The second thing is, and Daniela, you mentioned this, it gets people engaged. People have to at least nod. There's something to draw them into you. Otherwise, it's a lecture. And I don't know about you, but we've all been to too many lectures in the past. So you've got to try and find a way to engage the audience. because they don't yet trust you. This is about also building a sort of a platform of trust. Okay, so once we've got that, we've got the audience just a little bit engaged, a little, especially if I may say so, British audiences, which tend to be quite reserved. Tristan, bear me out. If I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong. But they can be. So it's not like going to El Clasico, Daniela, where people are pretty comfortable telling you exactly what they think about how the game is going. In Britain, you're never quite sure what's kind of going on. Maybe the football analogy isn't going to work because Arsenal Chelsea is a different deal. Yes, okay, right. So here's the other thing about how to frame your presentation, and this is very much your thinking before you start presenting: is what do you want the audience to say, do, or agree as a result of you having made your presentation? So are you just going to go there, say your piece, be off, don't worry about it ever again the rest of your life? Well, if you're a Bill Gates, you can probably excuse me, or if you're Mona Siddiqui or someone like that, you can probably have that perspective. I suspect they wouldn't because they're good people. But so what do you want your audience to say, do, or agree? It's particularly important in a sales presentation because otherwise it's just been tea and biscuits, and I've had loads of those. It's got to be a point to our meeting. So say, do, or agree. This is before. So who's it who said start with the end in mind? Was it Sinek start with why? Stephen Covey, someone like that. Start with the end in mind. This is the outcome that we want, and everything else is therefore positioned, tailored to drive that particular outcome. Okay, what's next is who's going to be in the audience? Is it just me and Tristan? Just Daniela and Tristan? You know, who's going to be in it? Is it one-on-one? Is it one-to-many? Who's going to be there? What are their job titles? Are we connected with them on LinkedIn? Can we do some research so that we can say something which is really insightful? Because that's why people want to hear us. That's why they've asked us to present. And now, do you know the program Peaky Blinders? Does anyone know that program, Peaky Blinders? Yeah, nods. One of UK's finest exports. It's been to about 40 countries throughout the world. And at the end of series one, very first season, Tommy Shelby, the main character, is doing a pitch to Billy Kimber, who runs several racetracks, horse racing tracks. He does a pitch to them. And it's a 60-second pitch, and I do a separate session on this. It's one of the best 60-second pitches you will ever hear. And he talks to Billy Kimber. But most important thing is he says something really insightful. He tells Billy Kimber something about his business that Billy Kimber almost certainly doesn't know. Like one of his vendors is stealing money from him. I won't go into won't spoil the plot too much, but one of the vendors is stealing money, and that is news. So Tommy Shelby, the presenter on this occasion, has taken some insight, some real business insight, which is of real value to his audience, which is only 2 people on that particular occasion. So and your insight might be the knowledge of their particular market, the knowledge, or if it's a big company, you might know what's going on in a bit of the company that your audience is either pleased with or worried about. And though, because I'm a simple bloke, I look through a smaller number of lenses as possible. So we're either pleased with something or we're worried about something. Occasionally, there will be three lenses, which is say, do, or agree. Not many more, because we haven't got the attention span to take in that much more. Okay, so who's going to be in the audience? How do we think they're going to respond? what messages are they going to be responsive to? What are their interests? So if someone in the audience, and sometimes on big IT outsourcing contracts that I've worked on, you will have everyone there from finance to IT, big one, to HR, if there's going to be any outsourcing going on. You'll have lots of vested interests. And so as the presenter, you're going to have to bear those interests in mind. And you're probably not going to want to tell or say anything too contentious, too controversial, not in that meeting. This is somewhat going off-piste. If you've got something very controversial to say, then you need to go and speak to someone before the presentation takes place so that you can start managing their expectations. Sorry, that's a little bit off-piste, but highly, highly relevant. I know that because I've done it before. And what's that Mike Tyson thing? A great strategy, or a strategy is great until you get punched in the face. And I've been punched in the face more times than I care to mention. So that's how to manage expectations, understanding your audience, who's in there, what messages they're likely to be susceptible to. Okay, now I'm just going to take a quick break. You've both been, and Natalie as well, Natalia, beg your pardon, both been very quiet. Is this going okay? Is this a sort of thing you were hoping to see, or is there anything extra you would like to say?
Taking notes. I like your lenses thing, and yeah, bringing people closer, and the say do agree. I think I sometimes add the looking for the nod or looking for the action after I finish the presentation, go back to add it, and maybe I should think of that up front and then build the presentation around it.
Good news. Thank you for that. Excuse me. Daniela, anything else?
Yeah, I love the framework, to be honest. Just having those in mind. You mentioned that it should be before, perhaps, right? Before we deliver the presentation. But I believe we can get lost quite easily as soon as we start the presentation. So I would say it would be good to have it in mind as, let's say, one person that we identified within the audience, that we connect more, like have more eye contact with that person. And maybe just point that person as that framework, to not forget that we need to go back to that particular framework as part of the whole presentation, because as we know, there are many other topics that can come up, right, as part of the conversation. Yeah. So maybe just try to point someone as part of the audience and then go back to those particular 3 points as well. I like that framework. Actually, I haven't even heard about it before, so not to get lost, right?
Yeah,
topic.
Absolutely. It's almost like, have you seen this before? Because that is actually on my next slide. You can't see the slides, of course, because I'm just using them to drive my conversation. But no, you're right. When you're actually in the room, there are some other dynamics that take over. And the old General Patton comment about you've got to have a strategy that survives first contact with the enemy, so that you can adapt after that. And because if that friendly face in the audience that you just identified, Daniela, you can see how they're responding to certain points, then you can adapt your presentation accordingly. You have to have lots of confidence, and you really have to know your material inside out to be able to do that, and some experience as well. But all those things are very good. The other things that are important about, so we talked about say, do, agree, who's going to be there, tailor the presentation according to your audience so that all the messages land successfully. Some really basic stuff like how long have we actually got? You would not believe, or perhaps you would, a number of presentations I've been to, an hour is set aside for your presentation. And of course, an hour is from 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock, or from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock today, that we're presenting, not from an hour from when you've set up and got it all fired up. It's you've got an hour in the room and that's it. So you've got to tailor accordingly. But also, by confirming how long have we got, you avoid being half an hour into your 1 hour presentation and someone else will say, I'm sorry, I've got to go now because I've got another meeting to go to, because we've all got competing agendas. So it's such a basic thing. I'm almost feel like I'm offending the audience, but actually I'd rather be embarrassed once than whatever the rest of that sentence is. So I think it's really important as a professional courtesy to your audience in understanding how long you've got. And also, because one time I went to do a workshop in Dusseldorf with a big telecoms company. Is that where you are? Are you there now, Tristan?
I'm in Köln, so I'm down the road.
You're down the road. Wow.
Yeah.
I should have picked that up earlier. I went to see this guy who's the chief information officer for a telecoms company. And I had 3 or 4 of my team with me. We were over from obviously the UK, and we're in reception. We'd agreed a 2-hour workshop with this guy and a couple of his direct reports. And when the receptionist phoned up, the assistant to Armin said, I'm really sorry, but something's come up and he's got to go to the airport now because he's got an important thing to do in Milan. So what was our 2-hour slot, all of a sudden we had 10 minutes over a glass of water in his office. Now that happens more than you might think, and it will almost certainly happen to you at least once in your career if you're meeting the right level of seniority people. So what do you do in that instance where you abandon your presentation and you don't try and do 10 seconds on each slide, and you roll your sleeves up and you get hold of a piece of paper and go, okay, this is where I wanted to be by the end of the presentation. And do you know what? We achieved, I think, more in those 10 minutes than we would have done in a 2-hour kind of workshop, because this guy was a decent chap anyway. He said, I'm so sorry, this has been a real mix-up. You've all made the effort to come across and see me. So he was in embarrassed mode, if you like. That gave me an opportunity, if you like, to I hesitate to use the word exploit, but anyway, take maximum advantage of. That's the same by any other. And I got meetings with each of his direct reports. I sent him an email as a result of doing this. We would love to meet your direct reports to talk about these subjects. And because it came from his email box to his direct reports, that was an instruction with a small I, an instruction for his direct report. So I achieved everything I wanted from that meeting. He probably felt a little uncomfortable or guilty because he's very polite. We're in Germany, everyone's polite. And well, not everyone, but he was. And that gave me a fishing license to go back and report back on what I'd learned from the direct reports, and therefore the solution I wanted to put to that company, which was worth ultimately just over $1.3 billion in the end. So nothing to be sniffed at. And the last invoice, by the way, that they paid of mine was 250 quid. So there's a massive distance in between those two things, but the principles are still very much the same. Okay, so how long have you got? And sometimes that can be a really uncomfortable part of the conversation, but you must do it. The next thing is 6, not 66. So the reason I say this is that I did some coaching for someone who's now a client, a woman who's now a client, who was a little anxious about having to do a presentation to the CEO of a county council here in the United Kingdom. That would be an organization probably of a couple of thousand people, and she was presenting a solution to that chief executive, which is quite a scary place to be if you're not used to it, I suppose. Anyway, because this person is a Cambridge MBA, so she's a very clever person, really knows lots about her innovation subject. and she asked me if I'd go in and crystallize her messages, help her prepare for this presentation. She had 66 slides lined up to go through. Now, with the greatest of respect, this again, that becomes a lecture, and I haven't got the attention span to cope with 66 slides. But I've just done a big contract with another telco in the UK, which I won't name. But they started out, their first presentation to me was one of 49, which is a slide I never want to see again. How am I supposed to cope with 49 slides? Or you, Frank, for that matter, Tristan? This is not that kind of environment. So if you're presenting to a CEO, I would say six slides maximum. And then you want to get past those 6 slides and into conversation as quickly as possible. So those 6 slides, they take 10 minutes. They're just to cover some ground, to show that they're an opportunity to engage. Actually, it's to soften the blow of being face to face. And then it's a conversation for you to show off how much you know about their organization and about how much you think you understand their issues, subject to whatever the chief executive thinks on top of that, because they will have another view. So it's the point there is 6, not 60, not 66. That's the point. Okay, so that's during, I beg your pardon, that's before the presentation. I realized I did meander a little bit, but I think it kind of made sense. Okay, so now we've been through terrible ways to start. We've been through some actions you need to take through before the presentation, the research, who's going to be in the audience, and all of those things. Just having a quick look at the time. I want to make sure we get out of here 2 o'clock UK, just to respect everyone's time. So great ways to start out is thanks, Tristan, for inviting us to present today. That does a couple of things. It's a bit basic, but it's a positive way. Thank you is much better than sorry. Thank you for inviting us. It gets things off on it because we're British, and we're nice people. Now I recognise, Danielle, you're not British, but you are still a decent person. That's why we're talking today. So that's a really positive way as a thank you. It also pays a silent compliment to the person who's organised it, who is almost certainly junior to the rest of the people in that room. So they're going to bask in that recognition just for a few seconds. That does a couple of things. It gets them on side as well. You never know when you're going to need that relationship. Then you're going to confirm how long we've got, which we've already been through. And then you're going to say front and center, we here to show you how we're going to solve your problem of, and then fill in the rest of the sentence. Your problem of your IT is costing too much money. You need to say 40%. Your HR systems, you're losing too many people. You've got too much attrition going. Whatever the problem happens to be, then we need to articulate that. And then what you want to see is nodding heads. Yes, we're all here to talk about that. And if you haven't got those, you absolutely need to confirm, okay, so what do you think we're here to talk about? Because otherwise you're wasting your time, and probably more importantly, theirs. So make sure we're all on the same page, literally. Okay, so it's professional, it's succinct, and it engages the audience. It gets some nodding heads. Have you ever heard, can I just ask you now, so have you ever heard of an agreement staircase? Does that make any sense at all? Doesn't matter if it doesn't. An agreement staircase. An agreement staircase is, in modern digital parlance, you would call it a micro commitment. Does that resonate at all with you? Yeah, okay, right. So it's where you get people saying yes, because it draws them into you. So, am I wearing socks? That's a ridiculous example, but yeah, we're all gathered here today to talk about, is that right? Yes. It gets us involved. It's a positive. It's human nature. We get further involved. We're building an agreement staircase so that sooner or later we're going to ask a question that really counts, and we want them to say yes to that too. So that takes a lot of thinking about, but that's where we want to go with that. So that's a great way to start your meeting. Right. During the presentation, we referenced trust already. Trust, if you want to create the atmosphere of trust, but if you're not trustworthy, then you're never going to do that. So what does it take to be trustworthy? First of all, Tristan, Daniela, Natalia, what do you think it might take to appear trustworthy, to be trustworthy?
Maybe with your conversation about story or journey and setting it up beforehand, that you're following through on the promise, or the promise is going in that direction, and maybe you're qualifying it with some third party rapport or something, or success.
Yeah. So relatable. You're relatable. Okay. Anything else, Daniela or Natalia? Doesn't matter if you don't, but you're welcome to.
Yeah, taking into consideration like previous cases with other clients, but also trying to mix that information with with the data that you already got from that particular company, and trying to make them to visualize themselves that they can actually have their problem solved with your solution. So just trying to blend those, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's your professional credentials. You have experience and insight. You can therefore be trusted to deliver a solution that's going to solve the client's problem. Fantastic. Thank you. So yeah, but those are great things to build trust. There are, I think, some more basics before we build on those. And number one is be ready to start on time. Again, we've already said that before. Maintaining eye contact during your presentation. Daniela, you've already referenced this. Find that one person in the audience that you can be friendly with, although not over friendly, because if you maintain eye contact for a man, that can be a bit creepy sometimes. So just use it sparingly. And then asking, of course, how long do we have, so that there are no surprises. Excuse me. Tell them up front again, so they all know why we're there. I think I've mentioned this already, but now maybe I haven't mentioned this already, but I used to work in investment banking, selling technology to investment banks, who, if you think people have an attention deficiency now, you want to try working on the trading floor. So their whole thing about they used to have 3-minute meetings. I need to tell you, what? So what? Now what? So what are we going to talk about? We're going to talk about the cost of IT. So what? We're going to talk about our IT is too expensive. So what? That's dragging down the performance of our shares. The market is underpricing us because it doesn't like the cost of our IT. Oh, that's the so what? That's worth investigating. Now what? Now what are we going to do about that? And that's the bit where we're going into say, do, or agree. What do you want your audience to say, do, or agree? Well, the ideal thing would be to outsource your IT to us, and we'll take care of it. But that's so you would have to demonstrate your credentials before that. But that links what, so what, now what, with what do we want them to say, do, or agree. And that makes sure you have continuity throughout your meeting. You're focused on the objective with the end in mind. Okay. And then once we've delivered that, did that resonate at all? Did that make any sense? Okay, thank you.
Keith, just quickly, could you clarify when you're say, do, agree, is that within the meeting, within the call, or is that the overall thing that you're leading them towards?
Yes, exactly, the latter. That's what you've got in your mind. You're not necessarily going to ask that out loud, but this is how you frame your presentation technique, if you like. What do you want them to say, do, or agree? And that drives how you go about things. But the what, so what, now what, you may not use those particular terms, but actually, if you're involved in a pretty senior meeting where you need to get to the point, they love that soundbite. And I learned that from a bloke called Roger Jenkins, who used to be the CEO at Barclays. But I'm going back a few years, but he was the CEO. What, so what, now what? And I tell you, it's fantastic. Okay, good. And then always, sometimes you take questions throughout the presentation, as we are right now, and I've got one and a half minutes left. So try and leave a few minutes at the end for Q&A. And here's a point. Sometimes you have a reserved audience, and they don't like asking questions. So if you are friendly with your host who's asked you there to do the presentation, arm them with a question. So they break the seal, so to speak. They ask that question, and that gives permission for everyone else to start asking questions then, because then you're into audience engagement, participation, and all of that. And it becomes a much more valuable meeting, because then you're actually talking with each other instead of presenting to them. And then, of course, and I'm trying to eat my own dog food here, finish on time. So I think we're at 59. We are at 59. So and we're up. So afterwards, in 30 seconds, next steps, actions as a result. What we can do as a result of having this meeting, what are the next steps? If there are no next steps, that's an issue. You probably just add tea and biscuits. So try and confirm what the next steps are. You want an order, you want an audience with someone else, whatever, what is it? Keep your word, read the actions. If they've asked you to follow up in writing, follow up in writing, and then respect deadlines, which is what I'm going to do now. I finished my bit, and I finished pretty much on time. Are there any other questions, final questions before we sign off today?
Thank you. I need a t-shirt now with the "you've just had tea and biscuits" on, or something like that.
yeah, you've just had tea and biscuits. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you didn't. Whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. Natalia, anything from you?
Go, Tristan, and have your t-shirt changed besides the tea and biscuits.
Yeah, I don't know if
And
it's
you
my
too,
size, but
and you too, Keith, don't forget about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Daniela, anything from you? Anything you would add, take away, change?
Yeah, no, all clear. Just I will go back to the notes. It's actually something to actually reconsider and start observing as well the new conversations and see how it can be applied for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good news.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you very much for your time and attention. That's been really, really helpful. I'm gonna, if you like, this is recorded, so I'm not going to put it out for public sort of consumption, if you like, but I'll send you a link of the recording if that would be helpful. And likewise, if there are any questions you've got as regards this, or if there's anything you'd like to see, kind of sales or presenting or communications related that you'd like to see something on, I'm always on the lookout for new subjects. What are people struggling with? So I'd be really grateful for a note. You won't be imposing. I'd be really, really happy to receive a note from you on something else you'd like presented. But otherwise, I'll be doing something else next Tuesday at 1:15 p.m. UK. No idea what it is yet, but there'll be something. I'll figure it out. Don't worry. But have a brilliant rest of the day. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Nice to see you all.
Bye, everyone.
Good day.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye.